Welcome to Master Network's Tri-State Regional Quarterly Training. Not just training, but more of, hopefully giving you some insights that you can take back to your business. I don't really like the word training, but it's more about developing your personal and professional selves. So first of all, I'd like to give it over to, Jim Sandler, who is our advisor on training and development. He's going to introduce you to the training team. And then Jim is going to be talking about, the 3 C's of leadership, which is connection, culture, and competency. And take it away, Jim.
Well, thank you, everybody, and welcome to this training. Thank you, Tina, for allowing us to get involved to enhance the training for the region. I'm heading up a training team of some absolutely fantastic trainers. I'll call them out as I see them on the screen. I have Teresa Safali. I have Lynne Roe, Jean Turman, Rachel Sirota, and I don't think the 5th one is here, and that's Karen Trindell. So we meet to enhance the learning and enhance the availability of knowledge that we can supplement the training from headquarters. Today I'm going to start talking about the 3, as Tina said, the 3 C's of training: connection, culture, and competency. And the one I'm going to focus on is culture. And as many of you know, Tina Campbell is in charge of culture for Master Networks. And Tina actually down at Connect used some of this information in a breakout session. So, I give her kudos for doing that as well. As we know, we have values, and one thing that has been said, Dr. Richard Winters, the author of You're the Leader, Now What? Leadership Lessons from the Mayo Clinic, basically wrote that effective leaders embody organizational values. So what are values? What are values? Values are generally adjectives that describe what's important to you. And why are those important? Because they form the values of the organization and the values that we hold to be important in our companies, in the people we deal with, in our families, in our chapters, etc. Now, Master Networks has a set of core values, and the core values for Master Networks are relationships, improvement, contribution, accountability, and results. So what's the difference between a value and a core value? A core value are those things that are so central to your persona and the reason that you wanted to start a company, if you have your own company, that if someone violates one of those core values, they leave you no choice, but you have to terminate them. They are so critical to the reason that you started your business, or so critical to the core of your being, that if someone violates it, you cannot deal with them. So for example, in my company, KM Consulting, the core values I have are respect. And by respect, I mean respect for me, you respect me, I respect you. You respect my time, I respect your time. Second, integrity. Doing what you say you're going to do. If you say you're going to do something, do it. And the third is confidence. So those are the 3 core values that I have. So now the issue is, what are your core values? So what I've done is I put an exercise that we're going to work on. And I think Tina put it into the chat. I can put it up onto the screen if I have screen sharing capabilities. And basically what we're going to do, it's called a value sort exercise. Can everybody see that? Just give me a heads up if you can see it. Beautiful. So basically, what we're going to do is, it says here to rate the various values. What I want you to do is I want you to take a few minutes, or a couple of minutes, and forget about ranking them from 5 down to 1. I want you to just take the ones that are rated a 5. So I want you to go through these, pick out the ones that you would rate as a 5, meaning they are always important to you. and take a couple of minutes and circle the ones that you would rank as a 5. So let's take them, because what we're going to do is we are going to now establish your core values.
And Jim, if they have more than 5, they
I
can
expect-
pare, they
I
can pare them
expect
down.
they're going to have a
later.
lot of them. We're going to pare down the list as we go along, Tina.
And again, that is in the chat. It's a Word doc in the chat.
Normally, when I do this exercise with business owners, or when I'm teaching a class at community college, people will have 10 to 15 of them that they rank as a 5. We got added. We've got 3. Somebody added a value. That's fine. That's fine. Let's get them down to 3. Once we have it down to 3, we're in business. Because now that we've got
Listen,
it
we
down
can
to
always go
3,
back later and
you can always go
revisit
back
this.
later.
Yeah.
And also in the chat, Tina put in this worksheet. So you'll be able to go back to the worksheet. And once you've got that list down to 3, those are your core values. Those are those things that are so integral to the fiber of your organization, to the fiber of what's important to you, that if anybody violates those, whether it's your business, your chapter, your family, your friends, we've got a big problem. If it's a friend and they violate one of your core values, how can they maintain the friendship? For example, my core values: respect, integrity, and competence. If you don't respect me, we can't be friends. We can't do business together. If you don't have integrity, if I ask you to do something and you lie to me about it, we can't do business together. We cannot be friends together. Competence. I want to deal with people who are competent. I don't want to deal with incompetence. Those are my core business values. And the way I lead my organization, the way I lead my company, the way I lead my life is those 3 very core values. But what are yours? And what I'd like to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now we're going to interact. Tina sent me, Jim, do you need to tell people about your core values before you stop doing business with them? But what I generally do in my business is I lay those core values out during the complimentary call that we have to determine whether we're going to do business together. Before I take on a new client, what I do is I have a call with them. And what we do is I lay out what it's going to be like to work with me, and what I expect of them and what they can expect from me. And part of that is laying out those 3 core values. So what we're going to do now, Tina, can you set up some breakout rooms? We're going to set up breakout rooms. And what I'd like you to do when you go into your breakout rooms is I would like you to share your core values with the people in your breakout room and have a discussion about what those core values mean to you in terms of your life, your business, your friendships, your chapter, etc. And that's the way you lead as an organization.
Different rooms.
I did not. If you would like to stay back.
I'm going to stay back, and this way I can see what room. I'll go in a different room from Lynn.
Right.
Lynn went out, so.
Everybody. Welcome back, everybody. How did that go?
That went great.
A couple of comments on that. How did those discussions go?
Really good.
Really good. What was so good about it?
Yeah, me and Tina got a chance to actually use your 3 values and create some things that are easy to remember.
Okay. Anybody else? Rick, you got your hand up.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I found it interesting. I was with Aviva and Stephanie, and all 3 of us were super passionate about our core values, and they were very different. So it just shows you that everyone has different core values, and they're all super important.
And that's why I explained Master Network's core values, which we all have bought into, but those don't necessarily have to be our own core values. We have our own separate core values. We've bought into the Master Network's core values, but we have our core values that are important to us in terms of who we interact with and who we deal with. And also in terms of our chapters, if we're not in a leadership position, these are core values that we expect out of the leaders of our chapter as well. Any other comments? Any other comments? Raise your digital hand. Sure, Stacy.
I have my real hand.
Your real hand. We don't know what real hands are. We only know digital hands.
Maybe
Stacy.
I had a little bit of a different one for me personally versus my business. I mean, for me personally, physical fitness, health, and personal development are kind of what's important to me in life, not to mention friendship and community. But that's not exactly, even though I teach those types of things, it's not exactly what is my core values for my business.
Okay.
So I don't know, is that what people have, different core values for their business?
You absolutely can.
Yeah.
Kathleen.
I found that, and also we found this to be very challenging, Jim, because so many were good words. So to go down to 3 was tough. So thank you for making me uncomfortable.
You're welcome. For those of you who haven't had the chance to go through the entire list, keep that list and keep whittling it down, because when you get down to 3, those are the ones that are really the core. Davin.
I was with Coach Glow and Lynn Rowe, and we found that we each had slightly different core values, but the one that we all had and shared was integrity. We really appreciate that when people say something, they do something. So say what you mean what you say. And we have coined us today as the team integrity.
Great. Tina.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about Stacy's thing for a second. By the way, I had a really cool I went to a webinar where a gentleman, he actually takes the core values, he does it for families. So it's a little bit different. Families work together. Can you imagine if I would have loved to have this if my kids were still home, but you could still do it. But especially like you have little kids and you go through the core values with them. Imagine if you came up with a core value for your family that they knew that they would not, that you would not budge on, or they wouldn't budge on. So think about how that could help them, set them up for some of the challenges that they might have as they're growing up with. Maybe it's friends, right, that are kind of taking them in a different direction. I'm just saying, I was really an interesting. So I think you can have family core values, personal. I think you can have business. That's just my feeling. Thank you.
Great. Lynn.
I think it's important to remember that while family values might be a little different from your personal values and a little different from your business values, they all have to support each other. If your personal values cannot support your business values, then you've got the wrong set of values. And I go so far as I do a training on values with not-for-profit organizations where we bring in new volunteers for the organization and we talk about their values. And we make sure that the values of those new volunteers actually support the values of the organization and vice versa. If they're not going to be able to get from the organization the things that are important to them, it's not the right place for them to volunteer. So you can think about it. It's also a great way to evaluate whether or not the company you're thinking about working for is going to be right for you. Do your values support their values? And do their values support your values? It has to go both ways.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lynn. Anybody else? Anybody else? So hopefully you were working on that a combination of values, the core values, those things that are so critical that if someone violates them, you cannot work together. You can't support one another. And as Lynn said, you wouldn't be able to work at that company because it doesn't fit. And you wouldn't be able to have someone work for you because it doesn't fit. So as a leader, what are those things, those core values that are so important to you, which is what we were dealing with, that are so important to you, that set up the entire organization that you're working with? That's what's critical to your ability to be successful in your personal life, your friends, your families, your business life, the people that you work with, your customers, your suppliers, employees, managers, etc. In your Master Networks chapter. What are the things we expect out of our leaders if you're not in a leadership position? These are all really critical. These core values are critical in developing leadership because, as I said at the beginning, leadership, connection, culture, which is core values, competency. Please continue to work on these core values with that value sort exercise. If you would like to go over them at any point, my information is in the chat. I'm happy to give a complimentary first conversation to see whether, in fact, our core values mesh. And from that point, I'm going to turn it back over to our next presenter, Lynne Rowe.
I would just like to say a little bit about Lynn. Lynn, thank you so much for coming. And I'm really interested in not only the core values, but in Lynn's talk about building trust within your teams. I think it's very timely. And Lynn is the president of LSR Consultants, and she provides strategic insight and practical advice to help owners of small and medium-sized companies design a business model that aligns with their goals. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. If you want to, for the next few minutes, put it on speaker view, then you can see me instead of a whole lot of little things. That would be great. So we're going to talk about building trust on the team. And actually, this is pretty timely right now because that actually is what's in the tidbits this month is the fact that it's important to build trust with the relationships you make within Master Networks, because by building trust, then you feel like you can recommend somebody or give testimonials or whatever. So, okay, so we're going to talk about it. A few years ago, there was a study that Harvard did, and they found that more than half of employees said that they would trust a stranger more than they would trust their boss. Now, I think that's a really sad statement of the way things are, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that once we get to know somebody fairly well, we then know what we have trouble with, what's a problem, that kind of thing, right? But we trust people every single day. We have a society that functions based on trust. I trust that the drivers of the other cars on the road will stay on their side of the road, right? I trust that the cook in the restaurant that I'm at is preparing the food in a safe manner. So we're trusting people all the time. And yet we hear each other say, I don't know if I can trust that person. I'm not sure, can we trust that person? That kind of thing, right? But what does that really mean? You have to think about trust. Trust is made up of a whole lot of different things. And if you break it down into specific things, you can figure out, maybe I can trust this person. So it can be broken down into different components, and being really specific matters. So, I'm sorry, just checking my notes here. So yes, building trust, it's a skill that you can learn, and you can rebuild trust in many cases, but not in all cases. So building trust takes time. And I'm using the word build here because it's an accumulation of acts. It's like building blocks that create trust. It's not the first time you see somebody, yes, I'll trust them, although we do that on the road. But really to build trust with somebody, it's an accumulation of acts. So we're going to do an overview of the components of trust today. And I want you to think about how you might apply some of these personally to your business, your relationships with family, friends, whatever. So the question you're going to be asking yourself, and Tina, can I share screen at this point? I think I can. I'll try.
Yes, and I put your handout into the chat.
Oh, great. Okay. So you guys can all see the circle of trust here. So
Yeah.
I'm using
It's only
circle.
part of the screen, so there you go.
Now you can see it all?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. So I've used a mnemonic here of circle to help you remember the different components. The first component, I've got people in the way here. There we go. You guys were all, your faces were all in my way. All right. So the first component is capacity. Does the person that I'm speaking with have the actual capacity, the skills, the knowledge, the experience to produce the results, to produce excellent results, whatever it is we're talking about? So, and then the question becomes, are we both clear about what that capacity is? So let me give you an example. I do trust my husband. I trust him in many ways. But if I needed brain surgery, I would not trust my husband because he's an engineer. He's not a brain surgeon, right? So having the capacity and understanding whether or not that person actually has the capacity, or could be they have the capacity to learn it. So I was working with one client a little while back, and she said, oh my God, I don't even trust this person to ship the product out correctly. And I said, well, have you taught her how you want it to be done? So we broke it down a little bit. Yes, she had the capacity to do it, but no, she didn't have the skills or the knowledge yet. So sometimes it's a matter of, do they have the capacity to learn the skill or the knowledge that they need in order to do something? So the question is, do you have the capacity, or does the other person have the capacity to actually do what it is you're trusting them to do? So the second one is integrity. And by integrity, I mean, can you count on this person to be honest and fair and authentic? And am I honest and fair and authentic and transparent? And do I respect boundaries? Those are all parts of integrity, and it works both ways, right? If I can't count on you to do what you say you're going to do, or you can't count on me to do the things I say that I will do, it becomes an issue and it breaks trust. The third one, the R, stands for reliability. This is one we see all the time, reliability. This is issues about timeliness and completion and results. Do they actually get it done? Responsiveness, do they respond to my calls, emails, whatever? So here's an example. I had a woman that I worked with, Gretchen. We worked together on projects together for about 5 years. And in those 5 years, she never once made a deadline, never once. Clearly, after a little while, I realized I could not rely on her to hit the deadlines. But I actually did trust her. She was an attorney and she was a very good attorney. So I trusted her for other things, but I could not trust her to be reliable, which meant that we could have a conversation and we could work it out, right? Once you've got an issue, once you know what the issue is, you know the issue is they don't have the capacity, you know the issue is that, you know, we've got an honesty issue or a fairness issue. If you know the issue is timeliness, it's a conversation you can have and you can rebuild trust at that point before it gets totally broken. So in the case of Gretchen, she and I talked, we had a conversation about hitting the deadlines, and we recognized that she was not going to be able to ever hit the deadlines. So we accommodated in whatever ways we could, because she was still very good at what she did, even though she never hit the deadlines. All right, so the third one is communicate. Honestly, I sometimes think this one should be number one, because the most important thing on this, I think, is caring. You need to make sure that it's not just the words that you say when you communicate, but it's also the intent of the words that you're saying. So, does the person really care about me? That's what everybody's asking. Do you really care about what I have to say, what I know, what I'm doing? And the other way around, are you communicating that you care about them? And that has to deal with clarity and openness and intent. So that's the C in circle. The next one is lead the way. So that's be the person that other people can trust. Start there. One of my clients was saying that he was having struggles with his boss. He couldn't trust her. And I said, well, think back to a time when you had a boss that you could trust. And we talked about his first boss, and his first boss always came to him and said, I trust you to do this. Now, she then taught him what he needed to do. She then made sure that he had the capabilities to do it. But she started by saying, I trust you to do this. And that made him feel very important and special. So you can build trust by being the first person to trust in a relationship. And the last one letter, the E in circle, is engage others. So helping others to understand the different components of trust and where it breaks down and how you can rebuild it. Okay, by having conversations about where it's breaking down, not saying, I don't trust you, but talking specifically about the areas where trust is being broken. And the last thing I want to say about trust is the derailer. Confidentiality is usually the biggest one that breaks trust, and it makes it really hard to rebuild. But confidentiality goes two ways. If someone has to know that what you've said to them or what you're talking about is confidential. So if someone says to you, I'm thinking about getting a divorce, but they don't tell you that that's confidential, they're not really talking about that yet, you might accidentally say something because you don't know. So this is important too. If you tell something to someone in confidence, then you have to also let them know that it was a conversation in confidence and that you don't want that conversation to go further. And if someone tells you something that seems like it could be confidential, ask the question. Is this confidential? Do you want me to keep my mouth shut? It's a whole lot easier to maintain trust and maintain confidentiality if you know that that's what you're supposed to do. So that's kind of my breaking down trust and the components of trust. We're going to break out into groups now, and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I will put them in the chat right now. Let me just find the chat here. Hang on. So the questions are, where do you feel you have the greatest opportunity to grow using this model or looking at these components of trust? That's the first question. Second question is, since we rarely talk about building trust with a specific person, okay, we talk about trust in general, but we rarely talk about how to build it with a specific person. And we did focus on building trust again in our tidbits this month, but that was more in general. So how do you want to take this information and use it with a specific person? So you don't have to tell us who the specific person is necessarily, but just in general. And the last question is, what's the fallout when you break trust?
Shoot.
All right, everybody. I hope you all had a good conversation. I would love to hear some thoughts, some questions. What did you get out of that?
I gotta jump in.
Raise your
Lynn.
digital hand because
Oh.
there's too many
Steve-
hands for me to
Steve
see.
Breen?
Go ahead.
Yeah, we just finished up with this one thought, and I think it's Yasi or Yesi. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing
Yasi.
that, but she mentioned.
You said it right.
Okay. She mentioned transferring trust, and I think it's such a big thing for master networks, and I never heard it described that way. But when you give a referral to someone, you know, and if you
That's
mention,
exactly
hey,
what it
this is the person who, you know, you want to list your house with, or, you know, you want to talk to about your banking, whatever the case may be, you're transferring your trust to the person you're referring to. And, you know, that's why it's so vital that people follow through on those leads and make sure they follow up with the person being referred, because you can destroy that trust very quickly. So I thought that was a great way to say it.
Thank you, Steve.
Can
And
I-
that was great.
Can I jump in with that?
Yes.
I want to segue on what Steve said. So guys, what sometimes people come to me and they're like, I'm so angry or annoyed with this person. They didn't get back to the person that I gave them the referral. And I'm like, okay, let me ask you something. How did you give them the referral? And sometimes they'll say, oh, I sent them an email. I'm like, did you follow up with them? Don't assume they received it. That's all I say to people is don't assume, go and just like, you'll see them in one of the Master Networks meetings. You can send them a private chat. Hey, did you get back to Mr. Smith? They're probably going to tell you, oh, I didn't even, I didn't know. I mean, in the day and age of where we're getting so inundated with, emails and texts and everything, just call the person and say, listen, I just sent you a referral. It takes you 2 seconds. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
That's great. Jim Salvucci.
Yeah, thanks. I was in a breakout room with Susan, Rachel, and Kate, and we had a pretty wide-ranging conversation. It was great. And we talked about what is it to trust others, what it is to be trusted by others, and also trusting yourself. And then Rachel did a great summary. I'm not going to ask her to reproduce it, but at the end where she just said, well, the one thing we keep coming back to over and over again are those values. So much of trust is, whether somebody's meeting your trust or earning your trust or violating your trust has to do with your core values.
It's interesting. They're very interrelated. Our conversation in my room was also, back and forth between the values and the trust. Who else has a comment or question, either for me or for Jim? Raise your digital hand if you do.
Stacy? Stacy had her hand up.
My real hands up. Well, I think we spoke a lot about being really clear as to what your expectations are. So can you do this project and I need it to be 3 pages, and can you do it by Thursday morning at 10 a.m. So it's very, very clear, at least to give the person a chance to know your expectations. And then if they can't do it, then you have to decide whether they have the capacity. Like Lynn was saying, it might not be something you give to that person anymore, that type of thing, but maybe they're good at other things. So part of it is just giving the right job to the right person.
I put in the chat, expectations equal agreement. Right? You'll get agreement if you tell your expectations. Jim has his hand up, and then Vanessa.
More of a question around core values and trust. If I go into the emergency room, I might trust that ER doctor and have no idea what their values are. They're in a position, they display a certain amount of competency, as long as, even if their bedside manner isn't all that great, and really the best ones have bad bedside manners, you still trust them. How does that work? That's the question I pose.
Jim, you want to go to that? You want to answer that question?
Are you calling on me?
Yes, Jim
Oh,
Sandler.
okay, I'm sorry. So how do you trust that person? Well, that's situational. I mean, obviously, in a medical situation, you want to have the person that is the most competent in order to handle what you're looking for. What you may, however, want to do is to have another person in the room who can then share your values, who can then inquire and potentially advocate for you and answer some of your questions. So as an example, my wife is a medical social worker, and you get into situations where you're working with people, and the doctor may not be the best person in there. They may be the best person, as you said, to handle the operation or whatever it is, but they may not be the right person to communicate. And one of the things Lynn was talking about was the communication factor. So it's good to have somebody else in there who can be an advocate for you, who can understand where you're coming from.
So I wanted to just, I will ask Vanessa in just a second, but I wanted to point out that there's a second page to what I was in that handout. And that talks about the actions related to each of these different components. And it's just, there's just a couple of ideas. They're not all of the actions, but it's not just enough to think about it. You have to take action in order to make a difference here, right? In order for you to have